A man hoped that the internet cafe owner could teach him how to use a computer, but it drew a burst of harsh laughter from him. In this day and age, is there really someone who doesn't know how to use a computer? The incredulous owner half-jokingly asked, has he been living in prison all this time? When he learned that the man had indeed just finished a 21-year sentence, the owner couldn't help but inquire about the crime he had committed. The man replied that it was only for possessing 28 grams of marijuana, which left the owner utterly shocked. In many places, marijuana trade is now legal. He's not a violent criminal. Why was he sentenced to 21 years for that? It turned out that California had enforced a harsh law known as the 3 strikes law. In short, if a person has 2 felony convictions, any third crime, regardless of what it is, could lead to a sentence of at least 20 years or even life imprisonment. Russell unfortunately became a victim of this law. As a result, he spent the most precious years of his life in prison. When he was incarcerated, he was in his early 20s. Now he had become a man in his 40s. Over 20 years of prison life had made Russell extremely cautious, like a machine that only obeys orders, never defying the commands of the guards. Even when faced with conflicts in the prison, he never dared to stop and watch, fearing it would bring trouble upon him. After completing all the release procedures, he walked with the guard to the door that all prisoners longed to pass through. As the prison iron gate slowly opened, after shaking hands and bidding farewell to the guard, Russell finally breathed the air of freedom. However, there was no joy on his face, only deep unease. Although 21 years had passed and the world had changed dramatically, society's prejudice against ex-convicts seemed to have never changed. To survive, Russell found a job washing dishes in a restaurant. The kitchen was narrow, crowded, and damp, but Russell had no complaints and even became the most diligent employee there. Years of imprisonment had shaped his habits of routine and obedience. He was always the first to arrive and needed to be reminded by the boss to leave. Every day on the bus ride home, Russell would habitually pull up the hood of his sweatshirt. He had exhausted his golden years in prison, and now this unfamiliar world only brought endless fear. 21 years of isolation had made him taciturn, afraid to make eye contact with others, and his speech was hesitant. He no longer desired to integrate into society. He only wished to curl up in his familiar dark corner, avoiding all gazes. Walking through the dim streets, Russell returned to his temporary residence, usually around 1 a.m. Eating cheap fast food and watching boring shows on TV, he felt like a lost child, not knowing how to pass the long and empty time. As he was released from prison, he still had 3 months of parole, during which he had to report to his parole officer weekly and update them on his situation. The parole officer informed him that he could submit reports via email without needing to go in person. Russell didn't know what email was, but to cover up his embarrassment, he still agreed to it. Then, he walked into an internet cafe, intending to register an email account, but after starting the computer, he was at a loss, leading to the scene at the beginning. After learning about Russell's situation, the boss felt deep sympathy and patiently taught him how to use the internet from the beginning. Upon discovering that the internet could search for almost any information, Russell typed his father's name with trembling fingers. The search results quickly displayed a heartbreaking line of text. David passed away from heart disease on March 24, 2001. Staring at his father's memorial photo, Russell was overwhelmed by sadness and regret. He hated himself for the mistakes he made when he was young, for not being able to see his father one last time. That night, to vent his grief over his father's death, he did not go to a bar or any entertainment venue. Instead, he took a large drink and walked alone into an amusement park. That night, he experienced all the attractions in the park. He was carefree like a child, releasing his suppressed emotions freely. Perhaps recalling the joyful time spent with his father at the amusement park during his childhood, his furrowed brow finally relaxed for the first time, revealing a smile. In that moment, he did not have to care about the gazes of others and could briefly be himself again. However, joy is always fleeting. With the arrival of daylight, Russell had to return to reality and continue the heavy and tedious work. To keep this hard-earned job, he was even unwilling to take the legally mandated short breaks. Seeing this, the boss said there was no need to work so hard. An employee as diligent and obedient as him was hard to come by, so why would he be fired? One late night, Russell worked until very late. The boss had to leave early for a matter and handed him the shop keys. Russell felt anxious about this sudden trust and appeared at a loss, but the boss just gestured casually. Russell had no choice but to take the keys. After completing all the cleaning tasks, he carried 2 large bags of trash to the back alley. The cold, dark street was filled with the howling wind, adding to the desolation. Suddenly, from a nearby trash can, the sound of a baby crying startled Russell. He nervously looked around and then cautiously approached to check. Lifting the lid of the can, he was shocked to find a chubby baby lying inside. Though surprised, Russell hesitated for a moment before jumping into the can and carefully lifting the baby out. Confirming that no one was around, Russell brought the baby girl back to the fast food restaurant. The baby, who had been wailing just moments ago, miraculously stopped crying upon seeing Russell. Faced with this fragile life, Russell was completely at a loss. He wanted to call the police using the office phone, but the door was locked. He tried to find clues among the items wrapped around the baby, only to find a crumpled note that said the baby's name was Ella. Looking into Ella's bright eyes, Russell's eyes revealed a rare tenderness. Two abandoned lives met here, one abandoned by parents, the other abandoned by the laws of society. Perhaps feeling a sense of shared suffering, Russell decided to take Ella home first. But taking care of a baby was no easy task, especially for the inexperienced Russell. As soon as he entered the house, Ella cried again, and no matter how Russell tried to soothe her, it was ineffective. Until her little hand grasped the jingling keychain around Russell's neck, her cries gradually ceased. After finally lulling Ella to sleep, Russell woke up to the realization that he could barely take care of himself, let alone a baby. He dialed the emergency number, intending to hand the child over to the authorities, but at the moment the call connected, he regretted it. Perhaps out of reluctance, or perhaps fearing suspicion as a parolee, he trembled and said, "Wrong number," before hastily hanging up. Despite claiming it was a wrong number, the call still attracted police attention. Two officers came to inquire about the situation. Russell kept his gaze low, not daring to look up, and answer questions in a soft voice. Just as the officers asked to check his identification, Ella in the back room suddenly burst into loud cries, making Russell even more anxious. After understanding the basic situation, Russell was about to see them off when one officer reopened the door. It turned out he was also a father, and upon hearing the continuous cries of the child, he judged it might be due to gas and guided Russell on how to massage the baby's abdomen for relief. After the officers left, Russell tried to massage Ella and hummed the lullaby his parents used to sing to him as a child. This method indeed worked, and soon Ella stopped crying and fell asleep. That entire night, Russell stayed by Ella's bedside, not closing his eyes. As dawn broke, Ella cried again. Thinking that the child hadn't eaten since the night before, Russell speculated that she was hungry. But at home, there were only a few packets of leftover ketchup and condensed milk, nothing suitable for a baby. He first tried the ketchup, which Ella clearly disliked. He quickly switched to the condensed milk, and to his surprise, Ella had a great appetite, consuming more than 10 small boxes in succession. Once a full Ella fell asleep, Russell hurried to the supermarket to buy formula and baby supplies. Faced with a dazzling array of products on the shelves, he appeared quite lost due to his lack of experience. Fortunately, a kind lady came to help. Not only did she guide Russell on how to choose the right products, but she also imparted a lot of practical parenting knowledge. Worried about Ella being home alone, Russell quickly finished shopping and rushed back. It was Ella's presence that stirred up ripples in his stagnant life. In his spare time, he would read storybooks to Ella, and she seemed to understand, behaving exceptionally well. Russell found himself increasingly attached to this little life, even entertaining the thought of adoption. However, when he researched the laws regarding the adoption of abandoned infants, all he found were negative messages. Netizens warned, never take away an abandoned baby without proper legal procedures, as it could be seen as kidnapping. This made Russell, a parolee with a criminal record, feel even more terrified. Before he could sort through his chaotic thoughts, a strange smell came from Ella. She had soiled herself. With no experience in handling such situations, Russell directly carried her to the sink to clean her up. Despite the rudimentary conditions, Ella seemed to enjoy playing in the water. After the bath, Russell held Ella in front of the mirror, continuously whispering to her. Although he knew she couldn't understand, he spoke for a long time. Suddenly, a thought flashed through Russell's mind. He had lived in California for nearly 25 years, but had never seen the ocean. He wondered if Ella would want to go with him. He wondered if Ella understood, as she unexpectedly smiled at Russell. This smile lit up Russell's heart, and he immediately took Ella to the seaside. They admired the vast ocean together, felt the fine sand, and washed the mud off their feet. At that moment, they seemed like a real father and daughter. The sunset spread golden light over the sea, and Russell wrapped the sleeping Ella in his coat, sitting on a bench, gazing at the sinking sun on the horizon, reminiscing about his father. His father loved stamp collecting and had a rich collection. Now, everything had changed. His father had passed away, and he was no longer the innocent young boy he once was. Gradually, it seemed that Ella had gotten used to the days spent with Russell. However, the good times didn't last long, as an unexpected incident occurred. One day, while Russell was washing up, Ella accidentally rolled off the bed, crying out in pain. Russell held her tightly in his arms, filled with self-blame, continuously soothing her and apologizing. This incident made Russell realize that he might not be capable of taking good care of Ella. After a night of contemplation, he decided to seek help from a children's welfare agency, hoping to get guidance. But he didn't know that this act of kindness would lead to trouble. The staff asked Russell to fill out a form, and he truthfully provided all the information. The staff immediately noticed Russell's criminal record and stated that they needed to take Ella away and had already called the police. Russell was instantly shocked and instinctively asked if he could see Ella again. However, the staff did not respond. As he watched Ella being taken away, Russell could only say goodbye helplessly. Then, two serious-looking police officers began to question him, asking Russell to detail how he found Ella in order to locate her biological parents and file charges. Russell sat awkwardly in the chair, recalling the events in a disjointed manner. Remembering the horrifying warnings about kidnapping online, he, still on parole, feared getting into trouble and falsely claimed that he had only discovered the child that morning. Thinking that he might never see Ella again in this life, tears silently streamed down his cheeks. Upon learning that Ella would be sent to a foster home, Russell eagerly expressed his willingness to adopt her personally, but the staff coldly replied that it was not within their power to decide. After the questioning, the officers left, leaving Russell sitting alone in place. On the way home, Russell's emotions were in turmoil. Ella had brought a glimmer of light to his dark life, but in an instant, she had pushed him back into a deeper abyss of loneliness. Looking at the baby bottle Ella had used and the wrinkled envelope she had touched, he was filled with mixed feelings. Russell lay down on the bed in regret and despair. The next day at work, the investigating officer went straight to the restaurant. They asked Russell to identify the location where the child was found, just as they would ask a suspect to identify the crime scene. The officer learned from the employer that Russell had not been on duty a few days prior, which contradicted Russell's earlier statement and deepened the police's suspicion of Russell's involvement in the kidnapping conspiracy. After the employer verified with the police that Russell had a criminal record, the previous praise for Russell's diligent work immediately dissipated, and he was paid off and fired on the spot. Despite Russell's hard work and his determination to turn over a new leaf, the label of a criminal record still subjected him to discrimination. He dejectedly removed his apron and unwillingly tossed it into the trash can. Just as life seemed to take a turn for the better, it quickly plummeted again. Returning to his residence, he quickly packed his belongings, feeling that there was nothing left to hold on to, and decided to return to his hometown. Since he was still on parole, he was not allowed to leave California as per regulations. While buying a ticket, he nervously looked around, but fortunately, he eventually managed to purchase one. On the bus, he pulled up the hood of his sweatshirt and curled up. His mind remained highly tense, constantly suspecting that there were undercover officers on the bus. That night, he did not sleep at all. Only when he saw the vehicle pass the California state line did he relax a little and take off his hat. During a rest stop, he finally completely relaxed and stretched his tense body. However, just catching a glimpse of the playing card that Ella had bitten would bring back memories of their brief time together. On the way, a woman who was emotionally distraught boarded the bus and immediately sat down, covering her face and sobbing. Russell wanted to comfort her, but was met with a sharp question from the woman. Russell was momentarily at a loss for words and could only timidly offer a tissue, expressing his concern in the simplest way. When passing through a service area, Russell got off to buy food, but found he didn't have enough money, so he awkwardly put a bag of chips back. Back on the bus, just as he took a bite of his homemade mustard sandwich, a bag of chips fell beside him. It was the crying woman, who had witnessed Russell's awkward situation in the store and bought the chips as a small gesture of kindness. Russell invited her to try the sandwich, and she comfortably sat beside him. During the meal, the woman was deeply moved by this simple kindness. As the bus drove into the rolling mountains, the tired woman leaned on Russell's shoulder and fell asleep. Russell quietly enjoyed this moment of warmth. When the woman woke up, she became talkative, and they happily conversed. This was the first time in over 20 years that Russell had been so close to a woman, and he felt a long-lost joy. However, just as they were getting closer, the woman reached her stop. She left Russell her work address, hoping he would visit her if he had time in the future. As they shook hands to say goodbye, Russell felt a deep reluctance. Watching the woman's figure fade away, he felt a surge of emotions. Once again left alone, she was just a passerby in Russell's journey through life. After several days of bumps, Russell finally returned to his hometown. In front of his parents' graves, he shed all pretense. Only here could he completely open his heart and return to his true self. He sat by the tombstone, expressing his inner pain, honestly admitting he didn't know what he was doing, only struggling to survive. He felt deep guilt, but was also immensely grateful that they were his parents. After pouring out years of unspoken feelings, he felt an unprecedented sense of relief, and then, like a child, peacefully fell asleep beside the grave. After the memorial, Russell went to the trust company. His father had given him 2 keys during his lifetime, and he was there to retrieve what his father had stored. When the manager learned of Russell's visit, he personally came out to warmly welcome him, as Russell's father had been an important client of the company. The manager led Russell to the safe. The long-sealed door opened, revealing only a letter from his father. In the letter, his father expressed endless longing and deep love for him. Enclosed was an old photo of the 3 of them. At this moment, Russell realized he was not his parents' biological child, but an adopted son. Touching the yellowed photo, Russell wept uncontrollably. Inside the envelope, there was also a rare postage stamp worth a fortune. Just this one would ensure Russell's future without worries, and it was his capital for a new life and a foothold in society. The other key opened a storage room, containing everything about his family. Dozens of stamp albums his father had collected throughout his life, and several exquisite suits on hangers. Gifts his father had prepared for him upon his release, meant to help him regain confidence, bid farewell to the past, and bravely face the future. Russell was shocked by his parents' profound love and resolved to lift his spirits and live properly. In the blink of an eye, the 3-month parole period was over. Now fully free, Russell first arrived at the Children's Welfare Center. At this time, he was dressed in a suit, looking like a social elite. The staff mistakenly thought Russell wanted to adopt Ella and regretfully informed him that Ella had already been officially adopted by a family and was doing well. However, that was not the purpose of Russell's visit. He handed a letter to the staff, which included that precious postage stamp. He earnestly requested the staff to pass this letter to Ella when she turned 18. Just as his father had thoughtfully planned for him back then, he wished to pass on this heavy love. Afterward, Russell went to the station. He took out a compass and examined the route map on the wall. The ticket clerk asked him where he wanted to go. Russell smiled but did not answer. This time, he would seek out the woman he had met on his journey. He was determined to restart his own life. And as long as something begins, it is never too late.